So General Order Number 1 is an actual official Army rule that strictly prohibits alcohol consumption and sex on an Army deployment, believe it or not. Now, leave it to the Army to take the fun out of everything, even a frickin' war. And now, if you think about it, deployments are really long, like usually several months long. Now, could you go that long without taking a drink or getting laid? Probably not. Now, think about these poor, brave soldiers that, leave their homes and they sacrifice so much for our country, and then they get this rule slapped on them. Well, I didn't frickin' care because I was a virgin with a low alcohol tolerance, so it didn't even occur to me. In fact, I didn't even know about this rule until we got to Kuwait, where we were gearing up for the war. And all of a sudden, they started talking about General Order Number 1, and there's all these grumblings, and people are like, oh my God, how am I going to abstain for so long? And I'm like, I don't get it. But despite being this, religious fanatic who was probably going to miss praising Jesus more on Sunday mornings than my occasional Midori sour or wine cooler, shouldn't we be focusing on other things? I mean, sure, it's my inalienable right to, be able to bone my brothers in arms and throw down a few beers in the process, but, shouldn't I be focusing on other things to be able to come home safely? Well, my commander didn't think that our desire to live was strong enough to keep our hands off of each other. And in fact, he actually thought General Order Number 1 wasn't restrictive enough. He thought it needed some more muscle. So he hired an attorney to write this official memorandum, this amendment to General Order Number 1, to make our lives even more miserable. So I happen to be friends with this attorney, and he was this brilliant guy, and he's in the Army too, and he's bored out of his mind because basically, we spent 2 months in Kuwait doing nothing, are we going to war or what the hell's going on? So he got an assignment, and he's like, all right. He poured so much energy into this stupid amendment. You thought that he would be writing some new constitution for a liberated Iraqi democracy. The way he was at his laptop, oh yeah. And then he starts chuckling to himself. And I got a little worried because I was friends with him and I knew this guy was a total dirty perv. And I'm like, well, why is he laughing? What does that have to do with this memorandum that he's writing? And so I kind of hovered over his shoulder waiting for him to finish. And then I was like, oh, you got to give me a special sneak peek before you submit this to the commander. So I did. I took a look at it. And General Order Number 1, Amendment 1, specifically banned masturbation. And just in case we needed to understand what constituted masturbation, this amendment went on to specify that men were not allowed to fondle their penises in any way, shape, or form. Well, finally, something from the Army that screws over guys instead of just the women. Oh, no. I spoke too soon because I continued to read the memorandum, and it went on to say that a woman will not pleasure herself by either inserting fingers or objects into her orifice, such as a tube of chapstick. Now, I know I was a virgin at the time, but I kind of knew about that whole size matters thing. And I was like, should I educate my friend on the fact that it's certainly going to take a lot more than a tube of chapstick to feel some kind of ounce of pleasure? But I didn't. And then his wife ended up divorcing him, so I felt like this really bad friend. So I finished reading this memorandum, and I'm super excited, not because, I can't stick my fingers inside of me, but because my friend, this attorney, is actually going to submit this to our commander for approval. And I just wanted to be a fly on the wall and look at my commander's face when he read penis, orifice, chapstick. Well, it turns out that, yes, my commander was crazy, but he was like, no, you got to water this down. This is a little too much. So we did have a new memorandum. It was watered down, but I made sure I told as many people as possible the original wording. Now, once this memorandum, this amendment was approved, my commander started a sexual inquisition. And he thought that it would be easiest to start with the married couples in our unit. So even though we're supposed to be gearing up for a war, he thought he'd prioritize our unit's celibacy over our war preparedness, and he'd go around and ask, "Do you think they're doing it?" Now, I think he clearly didn't realize that most of us don't take it upon ourselves to gaze at our coworkers getting it on and then tattletale. Plus, I think he forgot that we were living in tents, like a big canvas tent with 65 of our closest coworkers with only 3 inches separating our cots from each other. So where the hell are we going to get it on anyway? And in fact, it didn't have to be this way. So in addition to this masturbation policy, we didn't have to have these crazy co-ed tents, but he decided he wanted to be a leader of desegregated tents, and how dare the women get their own tents. And so he made us all mingle with each other. And then when some of the women tried to hang ponchos from the ceiling to kind of conceal their cots so they could change in privacy, he came ripping through the tents and tore that shit down and was like, "How dare you try to destroy unit cohesion? Yeah, how dare I try to destroy unit cohesion by not allowing all the guys to watch me change my clothes?" So I had to become the master of a quick panty change inside of my sleeping bag with essentially my entire chain of command next to me. And then I also fell back on that special skill that you learn in the 7th grade gym locker room when you don't want your friends to see your budding mosquito bites and you kind of like feed your bra through your t-shirt. So I did that too, but after a few months, it just gets old, and you just kind of hope that people stop caring. Well, most people stopped caring except my special war buddy, Ricardo. He wasn't going to let General Order Number 1, the masturbation policy, or me sleeping 3 inches away from him, stop him from his daily ritual of self-love. In fact, that was the exact inspiration that he needed. But more on that later.